When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. It wasn't pride that kept my tears inside. It was disbelief. I never imagined the day would come when I'd be told, so calmly that I no longer belonged in the home I'd helped build. The house was quiet that morning. The kind of quiet that comes not from peace, but from words that have run out. Before continuing, please subscribe to our channel and like our video. I was standing by the kitchen sink, washing a cup that wasn't even mine. I remember how the sunlight hit the counter, how the dust floated through the air like little ghosts. That's when she came in, Anna, my daughter-in-law. Her face pale, her hands trembling just slightly, like she had rehearsed what she was about to say but still wasn't sure how to do it. "Mom," she started, her voice soft but firm. "I think it's time you stayed somewhere else for a while." I turned off the water, still holding the cup. I didn't answer right away. When you've lived long enough, silence becomes your armor. You learn that the first thing you say in pain is almost always the thing you'll regret later. I placed the cup upside down on the dish rack and looked at her. She couldn't meet my eyes. Her fingers twisted the hem of her sweater. Her lips pressed together, like a child caught hiding something. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to ask what I'd done wrong, when I had become the burden, but all I said was, "All right." It was the only word I could manage without breaking. Behind her, on the counter, sat a stack of unopened letters. My name was on them, my handwriting. I'd written those letters to my son Daniel while he was away for work. Letters filled with recipes, prayers, and motherly reminders. Don't skip meals, stay warm, tell Anna I love her. And now they were all unopened, sitting right there beside the fruit bowl she never refilled anymore. When I walked back to my room, I didn't pack right away. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the photograph on the dresser. Our family, smiling in front of that same house on Daniel and Anna's wedding day. I had worn a pale blue dress that day. Daniel had joked that I looked more nervous than the bride, and maybe I was, because I knew deep down that from that day forward, my son's life would no longer belong to me. It would belong to them. Still, I never thought I'd lose it completely. I remember the sound of her footsteps fading down the hallway, then the door closing softly. Not a slam, just quiet. Quiet enough that you could hear your own heartache. I picked up my small suitcase, the one I'd kept under the bed for years. It had a faded travel tag from when I last visited my sister in Ohio. I thought about calling her. I even picked up the phone, but I didn't. Because how do you tell someone that your own family doesn't want you anymore? I folded a few clothes, my rosary, the old family photo album, and then at the very bottom of the drawer, I found it. A small envelope sealed, with my name written in a handwriting I knew but hadn't seen in years. Anna's handwriting. The air went still. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just stared at it, wondering why she'd written to me when she could have spoken. Wondering what could possibly be inside that she couldn't say aloud, and that was the beginning. The day my daughter-in-law told me to leave wasn't the day everything fell apart. It was the day I finally saw what had been breaking slowly, quietly, all along. The love I thought we shared had cracks I'd ignored for too long, and inside that envelope was the truth. She'd been hiding, the one that would change. Everything I thought I knew about my family. Before Anna came into our lives, it was just Daniel and me. Our home wasn't big, a 2-bedroom house with creaking floors and a garden that bloomed wild every spring. But it was enough for us. After my husband passed away, Daniel became my reason to get up in the morning. He was only 17 then, still finishing high school. He didn't talk much about his father's death. He carried it quietly, the way he carried most things. But I could see the grief in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. We had our routines, little rituals that kept us going. Every morning, I'd make him breakfast. 2 eggs, toast, and coffee just the way he liked it, a little too sweet. He'd sit at the table, reading the newspaper, pretending to be older than he was. Sometimes he'd make me laugh with those silly headlines he'd make up just to see me smile. Our bond wasn't loud or dramatic. It was built on years of quiet understanding, shared meals, small gestures, and the comfort of knowing someone is always there at the end of the day. That's what motherhood felt like to me. Not grand or glamorous, just constant. Then one day, Daniel came home with Anna. I remember it so clearly. It was spring. The lilacs by the front gate were blooming, and I was wearing my old yellow apron. He walked in with that grin I hadn't seen since he was a boy, and behind him stood a young woman with soft brown eyes and a nervous smile. She held a bouquet of daisies, and I thought she had the gentlest face I'd ever seen. "Mom," he said, "this is Anna." Her voice was light, almost musical when she spoke. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Parker." "Just call me Mary," I told her, wiping my hands on my apron. "No one calls me Mrs. Parker anymore." From that moment, something inside me softened. I could see how much Daniel adored her. The way he looked at her. It was the same way his father used to look at me all those years ago. Love changes a person's eyes. It fills them with hope. Over the months that followed, Anna became a regular part of our lives. She'd help me cook on Sundays, bring me small gifts, candles, tea, hand cream. She always said she wanted to spoil me a little, and I let her. I thought of her like a daughter. Maybe even more so because I never had one. When Daniel told me he was going to marry her, I didn't hesitate. I gave them my blessing. Though a small part of me, the selfish part every mother has, worried about what it would mean. About how much space would be left for me in my son's new life. But when they bought their first house, the one I now stood in, years later, being told to leave, I was proud. Daniel called it our dream home. He said it was big enough for family dinners, holidays, maybe even grandkids one day. When they moved in, Anna insisted I stay with them for a while. "Until you find a place closer," she said. I didn't think much of it. My apartment lease had just ended, and truthfully, I liked being around them. I thought we were building something together, a new kind of family. The early days were beautiful. We'd have breakfast together on weekends. Daniel would sit by the window, reading the news, while Anna and I cooked. Sometimes we'd bake. She loved apple pie but always forgot to add cinnamon, and I'd tease her for it. She'd laugh and say, "That's your special touch, Mom. Mine's just sweet but incomplete." I didn't realize then how true those words would become. I still remember the first winter we spent together. The heater broke during a snowstorm, and all three of us huddled in the living room under piles of blankets, drinking hot cocoa and telling stories. Anna told me about her childhood, how she grew up in a small town, how she lost her mother young. Maybe that's why I felt such tenderness toward her. I thought in some small way I could fill that void. But as time passed, little things began to change. Nothing big, not at first. Just moments that made me pause, the way Anna would flinch when I offered advice, or how Daniel's laughter grew quieter around me. They started spending more time alone, closing doors that used to stay open. I told myself it was normal. Newlyweds needed their space. Still, sometimes I'd hear whispers behind closed doors. A low argument, cut short when I entered the room. One afternoon, I found Anna crying in the kitchen. She brushed it off quickly, saying she was just tired. But when she turned away, I saw the small envelope in her hand, the same kind I would later find in my drawer. She slipped it into her apron pocket and forced a smile. I didn't ask what it was. Maybe I should have. Looking back, I realize how many signs I missed. The way Daniel avoided eye contact when I mentioned money. The phone calls he took outside. The nights they went to bed without saying goodnight. I'd always believed that love could weather silence, that patience could bridge any distance. But sometimes, silence is not peace. It's warning. Still, I held on to the image of us, the three of us, as a family. I baked, cleaned, helped in the garden, tried not to interfere. When neighbors visited, Anna would introduce me as Mom, and that word warmed me more than she'll ever know. I truly believed she loved me. in her own way. And maybe she did. But love isn't always enough to hide what's breaking underneath. One evening, just before Daniel left for a business trip, I overheard something I wasn't meant to hear. They were in the living room, speaking in low tones, but the walls in that house were thin. I was in the hallway, folding laundry when I heard Anna's voice, tense, frightened. "She's going to find out, Daniel," she whispered. "We can't keep it from her much longer." My heart dropped. Daniel's voice came next, sharp and low. "Not now, Anna, please. We'll tell her when the time is right." There was a pause, then a soft sob from Anna. I stood frozen, clutching the towel in my hands. Tell me what? What couldn't they tell me? I waited until I heard their footsteps moving upstairs. Then I sank into the chair by the hallway table, my heart beating too fast for a woman my age. For the first time in years, I felt like a stranger in my own home. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I asked Daniel what they had been talking about. He looked startled, guilty even, then smiled and said, "Just work stuff, Mom. Don't worry." But I did worry. Because a mother knows when her child is hiding something, and the look in his eyes that morning, it wasn't work stress. It was fear. In the weeks that followed, Daniel left for his trip, and things between Anna and me grew fragile. She became quieter, distracted. She'd forget to eat, forget to check the mail, forget to smile. Sometimes she'd start a sentence and never finish it, just stare out the window like her thoughts were too heavy to share. I tried to reach out. I offered tea, comfort, stories from the past, but she was distant, her kindness replaced by something hollow. And then came the day she told me to leave. That was when I found the envelope in my drawer. That was when I realized there was something deeper, something hidden, that connected all those small moments, all those silences, all those half-finished sentences. But I wasn't ready to open it yet, because sometimes the truth waits until your heart is quiet enough to hear it. The morning after I found the envelope, I placed it on my bedside table and stared at it for hours. It was such a small thing. White paper, sealed carefully, my name written in Anna's neat handwriting. You wouldn't think something so ordinary could carry so much weight, but every time I looked at it, my chest tightened, as though opening it might change everything I thought I knew about my own family. I told myself I'd wait until Daniel came back from his trip. Whatever this was, I wanted him beside me when I read it, but waiting became harder with each passing day. The house felt heavier after he left. Anna moved through it like a ghost, silent, slow, distracted. Sometimes I'd hear her crying in the shower, muffled but unmistakable. Other times, she'd sit at the dining table with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring out the window at nothing at all. One afternoon, I found her in the garden, sitting on the old bench Daniel had built. Her eyes were red, her hair uncombed, her fingers picking at the hem of her sleeve. I stood there for a moment before saying softly, "You're going to make yourself sick." "Sweetheart." She jumped a little, wiping her face quickly. "I'm fine, Mom, just tired." I wanted to believe her. I really did, but her voice trembled on that word. Fine. I sat beside her, the wooden bench creaking under our weight. The air smelled of rain, and the sky was a dull gray, heavy with clouds. I remember thinking how the whole world seemed to match the heaviness inside that house. After a long silence, I said, "You know, when Daniel's father died, I used to sit out here every evening. I thought if I sat long enough, maybe I'd hear his voice again." She turned to look at me, her eyes softening. "I never did," I continued, "but somehow sitting here helped me feel closer to him. Like grief doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it just sits with you quietly." Anna nodded slowly. "I think I understand that." I waited. Something about her tone, about the sadness in her eyes, told me she had something to say. But she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she stood up, brushing dirt off her skirt. "I should start dinner," she murmured. And just like that, the moment passed. like so many moments between us had lately, full of almost confessions and swallowed words. That evening, she cooked in silence. I watched her move around the kitchen, setting the table, chopping vegetables. Her motions stiff and deliberate. When I offered to help, she shook her head. "It's okay, Mom, I've got it." We ate quietly. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall. Halfway through the meal, I noticed she wasn't eating. She just pushed food around her plate. "Anna," I said gently, "you barely touched your dinner." She blinked, startled. "Oh, I'm not that hungry," I smiled faintly. "You said that yesterday." She looked away, and in that small, quiet moment, I realized whatever she was hiding, it wasn't something small. It was something that consumed her whole. Over the next few days, I tried to bring back normalcy. I baked her favorite muffins, lit candles in the living room, played the old records Daniel loved, but none of it worked. The house felt emptier by the hour. One morning, I noticed she'd stopped wearing her wedding ring. At first, I thought maybe she'd taken it off to clean, but when I asked about it casually, she froze. Her eyes flicked to her hand, then to me. "It's being repaired," she said quickly. Her voice was calm, but her fingers trembled as she reached for her teacup. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the floorboards. Every sound felt louder in the dark, every thought heavier. Finally, I got up and went to the living room. That's when I saw it. On the coffee table, under a pile of magazines, was a folder, one of Daniel's, the kind he used for work. I shouldn't have looked. I know that now. But curiosity, or maybe fear, got the better of me. Inside were documents, bills, letters, and something else. A hospital envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a statement with both Daniel's and Anna's names on it. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Rows of numbers, medical terms, signatures. But then my eyes found the line that made my heart stop. Pregnancy loss. 7 weeks. I sat there, staring at those words, feeling the air leave my lungs. They had been expecting a baby, and I never knew. A cold wave of guilt washed over me. How could I have missed it? How could I not see what she'd been going through? What they had been going through? I thought of the mornings she looked pale, the nights she didn't eat, the tears she hid. Suddenly, everything made sense. The distance, the silence, the envelope in my drawer. My first instinct was to go to her room, to hold her, to tell her I was sorry for not noticing. But as I stood outside her door, I heard her crying softly. Her voice was broken, whispering words I could barely make out. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I didn't tell her. I couldn't." I pressed my hand against the door, tears burning in my eyes. She didn't need me to ask questions that night. She just needed space to grieve. So I walked back to my room and sat down beside the unopened letter. Now I understood what it might hold. An apology. A confession. Or maybe just a goodbye. The next morning, she avoided me completely. She left early for work and came home late, barely saying a word. The house grew colder. Even the light through the windows seemed dimmer. I wanted to talk to her, but something inside me stopped. It wasn't fear. It was shame. Shame that I had found out by accident. Shame that I hadn't been the kind of mother she could turn to when her world was falling apart. Days passed like that. Silent breakfasts, lonely dinners. Then one evening, while I was folding laundry, I heard her talking on the phone. Her voice was low, careful. "No, he doesn't know I told her to stay. She thinks it was her idea." I froze. Told her to stay? Who was she talking to? My heart pounded. I stepped closer to the doorway. "Yes," she said again. "It's almost over. Once he comes back, I'll tell him. He deserves to know." A pause, then a quiet, trembling whisper. "She'll hate me for it. But it's the only way." I didn't hear the rest. I backed away slowly, my hands trembling. Whatever secret she carried, it wasn't just grief. It was something more. something that made her believe I would hate her for telling me the truth. That night, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, short and neat. The paper smelled faintly of her perfume. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to tell you face to face. I never wanted to hurt you, but there's something you need to know before Daniel comes home. The baby we lost. It wasn't his. I'm so sorry. Anna." The world went silent. For a long time, I just sat there, reading those lines over and over. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. It felt like the air in the room had vanished, leaving only that terrible, heavy truth. I didn't know what to think, what to feel. Anger? Disbelief? Sadness? But mostly I felt pity for her, for my son, for the life they had built on a foundation that was already cracked. I wanted to tear the letter apart, to pretend I'd never seen it, but my hands wouldn't move. Instead, I folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I sat in the dark, listening to the ticking clock and the faint hum of the night outside. Over the next few days, I watched Anna closely. She carried on as if nothing had changed. She cleaned, cooked, went to work. But there was an emptiness in her eyes that frightened me. Every time I looked at her, my heart broke a little more, because now, every smile she gave me felt like a plea for forgiveness, and every silence between us was filled with the truth neither of us dared to speak aloud. One afternoon, I gathered the courage to confront her. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the same cold cup of coffee she never seemed to drink anymore. I took a deep breath. "Anna," I said softly, "I found your letter." Her head jerked up. The color drained from her face. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she whispered, "I didn't mean for you to—" "I know," I said. "I wasn't supposed to find it, but I did." She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't want you to think less of me." I sat down beside her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," she paused, her voice breaking, "because you loved me like your own. And I didn't deserve it." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She looked so small, so lost. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "A terrible one. Before Daniel and I married, there was someone else. It was over, or at least I thought it was. Then, when I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I told myself it didn't matter, that I could love that baby as ours. But when I lost it, the guilt?" Her voice cracked. "It's been eating me alive ever since." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I never meant to hurt him," she said. "Or you. You both deserved better." For a long time, we sat in silence. The only sound was the rain tapping against the window. Finally, I said quietly, "Secrets have a way of finding light, Anna, whether we're ready or not." She nodded, her eyes distant. "I know. That's why I told him I wanted you to leave. I thought, if you weren't here, maybe it would be easier when he came back. Easier to tell him." The words cut deep, but I understood them. It wasn't cruelty. It was guilt. Shame trying to protect itself from the eyes of love. That night, she went to bed early. I stayed in the living room, staring at the rain-soaked window, replaying everything in my mind. When Daniel called from his hotel, I almost told him, but I couldn't. How do you tell your own child that the life he built is about to break? Instead, I asked about his day. He told me he missed home, missed Anna's cooking, missed my stories, and for a fleeting moment, I almost convinced myself that nothing had changed. But everything had. The next morning, I woke up to find Anna gone. Her clothes, her bags, all missing. On the kitchen counter was another note. "I'm leaving before he gets back. Please tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I loved him in the best way I knew how." I sat at that table for hours, the note trembling in my hands. The rain had stopped outside, but inside, everything felt washed away. When Daniel returned 2 days later, I was still sitting in that same chair. He dropped his suitcase, looked around and asked, "Where's Anna?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. All I could do was hand him the letter. When Daniel came through the front door, I knew right away something in me would never be the same again. He looked tired, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes lined with travel and worry. He smiled faintly when he saw me sitting at the kitchen table. "Mom?" he said, his voice warm. "You're still up." I had rehearsed 100 ways to tell him, but now that he was standing there, all I could do was stare. The letter lay on the table between us, folded neatly. "Waiting. She left," I finally whispered. His brow furrowed. "Left, you mean—" "Went to visit someone?" I shook my head. "She's gone, Daniel. She's not coming back." For a moment, he didn't understand. Then his eyes drifted to the envelope. He reached for it slowly, like it might burn him. "Did she say why?" I couldn't speak, so I pushed the letter toward him. He unfolded it with shaking hands. The paper made a soft, tearing sound, the kind that stays in your ears long after. I watched his eyes move across the lines. At first, confusion. Then disbelief. Then a silence so deep it seemed to swallow the room whole. He set the letter down carefully, as though it were something fragile. His lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, he whispered, "Not mine." His voice cracked on the word mine. I reached out instinctively, but he stepped back. "She wrote this to you?" I nodded. "I found it after you left." He pressed a hand to his forehead, pacing slowly. "She told you before she told me." "She didn't mean for me to read it," I said softly. "She was trying to find the right moment." He laughed under his breath, a sound too broken to be laughter. "The right moment," he repeated. "There's no right moment for something like this." He walked to the window, staring out at the gray afternoon sky. His reflection looked like a stranger, someone older, heavier, burdened by something he hadn't chosen. After a long silence, he said quietly, "I thought we were happy." "You were," I said. "For a while." He turned toward me, his eyes glassy. "Did you know?" "No," I whispered. "Not until after." He sank into the chair across from me, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. The stillness in the room was unbearable. Even the clock seemed to pause, as if time itself couldn't intrude on this kind of sorrow. "I keep thinking," he murmured, "about all the times she smiled at me. All the things we planned. Were any of them real?" I hesitated. "Love can be real even when it's broken, Daniel. Sometimes people make terrible choices out of fear, not malice." He looked up at me. "You're defending her?" "I'm trying to understand her," I said. "That's different." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know if I can." That evening, he didn't eat. He sat in the living room with the lights off, staring at nothing. I stayed nearby, silent, folding and refolding a dish towel just to keep my hands busy. Once he asked, "Did she say where she was going?" "No," I said. "Just that she was sorry." He nodded faintly. "She always said sorry for everything, even when she hadn't done anything." We sat like that for a long time, two people breathing in the same air, each grieving something different. Around midnight, he finally spoke again. "You knew before I did." "You had time to prepare," I swallowed hard. "There's no preparing for something like this." He turned toward me, his voice low. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" "I wanted you to hear it from her," I said. "Or at least, from her words." He looked at me for a long time, then nodded slowly. Maybe that was kinder. I wasn't sure it was. The next morning, I found him sitting on the porch steps, staring at the garden. The early light made everything look gentler than it felt. He was holding his wedding ring, turning it over and over in his fingers. "I can't stop wondering," he said quietly. "What I did wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong," I told him. "Then why wasn't I enough?" There's no good answer to that. Sometimes people carry wounds that have nothing to do with who we are. But it's the simplest questions, the ones that sound like children's questions, that hurt the most to hear. He looked up at me, eyes red. "You must think less of her now." I hesitated. "I think she was human." He frowned. "That's too generous." "Maybe. but bitterness won't change what happened. He let out a long breath. I don't want to hate her, Mom. I really don't. I nodded. Then don't. Let the truth hurt, but don't let it poison you. He closed his eyes and whispered, I wish I could forget. Days passed in a blur. Daniel called in sick to work. He barely ate. The house was heavy with quiet. Every chair, every picture, every smell of her perfume still lingering in the air. Once, I found him standing in their bedroom, holding one of Anna's sweaters. He didn't see me. He pressed the fabric to his face and inhaled, then set it back down carefully, like it was made of glass. I wanted to go to him, to hold him the way I had when he was a child. But he wasn't a child anymore, and grief isn't something you can hug away. That night, I heard him in the living room rummaging through drawers. When I went to check, he was holding a small wooden box, the one Anna used for keepsakes. Inside were photographs, postcards, and a folded piece of paper. He opened it slowly. It was an ultrasound image. He stared at it for a long time before saying, I would have loved that baby, Mom, even if it wasn't mine. My throat closed. I know you would have. He looked up at me, tears glistening. Then why did she think I couldn't? I had no answer. Only silence. He placed the picture back in the box and closed the lid. I'm going to find her, he said. Daniel, I just need to talk to her. One last time. He left the next morning before sunrise. I stood by the window watching his car disappear down the road, praying for something. Closure, understanding, peace, anything. The day stretched long and empty. I busied myself with chores, washing sheets, watering plants. But my mind kept drifting to where he might be. Hours passed before the phone rang. Mom, he said quietly. I found her. I held my breath. Where? At her sister's place. She's not well. My heart pounded. What do you mean? She hasn't been eating. She looks so thin. I think she's been staying there since she left. Did you talk to her? Yes, he whispered. We talked. There was a pause, long, fragile, and... He sighed. She cried. She said she never meant for any of this to happen. She begged me to hate her so it would be easier for both of us. What did you say? I told her I couldn't, that hating her would mean erasing everything good we had. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I asked if she loved him, the man before me. What did she say? She said she doesn't even remember what that kind of love felt like. That the only thing real to her now is regret. My chest tightened. Are you coming home? Not tonight, he said. She's fragile. I'll stay nearby. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the photograph from their wedding day. The two of them looked so young, so certain. I wondered if everyone who marries does so believing they're safe from heartbreak, that their love will be the exception. Maybe that's why heartbreak hurts so much. Because it reminds us we're not exceptions. We're just people. I must have fallen asleep at the table because when I woke, the phone was ringing again. Mom. Daniel's voice came through, raw. She's gone. My stomach dropped. Gone? She left while I was out getting food. Her sister said she just packed a bag and disappeared. Did she say where? No, his voice cracked. She left a note this time. Said she needed to find peace, that she couldn't keep breaking the people she loved. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All I could picture was that frail girl with tear-stained cheeks and trembling hands, walking away from everything she'd built, carrying nothing but guilt. Come home, I whispered. Please, Daniel. Just come home. He did. Late that night, he walked in, eyes hollow, shoulders slumped. He didn't speak. He went straight to his room. I wanted to follow, but something in his expression told me he needed silence more than comfort. The next morning, the sun finally came out after days of rain. I opened the windows, letting in the cool air, hoping it might sweep away some of the sadness clinging to the walls. Daniel joined me in the kitchen, his face pale but calmer. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down. She's not coming back, he said softly. I nodded. I know. He looked at me for a long time. You knew before I did, but you didn't tell me. You let me find out on my own. I think that was mercy, Mom. I wanted to say something, but emotion caught in my throat. He reached across the table, taking my hand. Thank you for staying. For not saying I told you so. For just being here. Tears welled in my eyes. Where else would I be? He smiled faintly, the first real smile in weeks. You always said families survive storms. I think this one might have changed us, but maybe we'll survive it too. I squeezed his hand. We will. For the next few days. We tried to rebuild some rhythm. We cooked small meals, took walks in the garden, spoke in fragments that felt like healing. But grief doesn't leave all at once. It lingers. Like perfume after someone walks out of a room. One evening, Daniel found me sitting on the porch with a box of old photographs. He sat beside me, flipping through them quietly. When he came across one of Anna laughing in the kitchen, he didn't look away this time. He smiled, a sad, fond smile. She was good once, he said softly. She still is, I replied. Goodness doesn't disappear just because people lose their way, he nodded. Maybe someday she'll forgive herself. Maybe, I said. And maybe you will too. He leaned his head back, watching the sky fade to orange. Do you think she'll ever call? I don't know, I whispered. But if she does, I hope you'll answer. That night, after he went to bed, I sat alone at the table again. The house was quiet, too quiet, but it no longer felt suffocating. Just empty in a gentle way. I thought of Anna, wherever she was. I thought of the baby that never came, the family we almost had, and I thought of Daniel, sleeping down the hall, trying to piece himself together. Loss has a strange sound. It isn't a scream or a crash. It's the soft click of a door closing. It's the whisper of someone saying, I'm sorry one last time. It's the silence afterward. When you realize the world hasn't stopped, even though part of you has. That was the moment I understood. This was the turning point. Not just for Daniel and Anna, but for me too. The day I stopped trying to fix what couldn't be fixed and started learning how to live with what was left. The weeks after Anna left felt like a blur of small moments. Sunlight through the curtains, the smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of Daniel's footsteps pacing through the house. It was strange how ordinary things could still exist when your heart was anything but ordinary. Some mornings, I'd find Daniel sitting at the kitchen table with his phone in his hand, as if waiting for a message that never came. Other times he'd be out in the yard, fixing things that didn't need fixing, tightening bolts, clearing branches, painting the same section of fence again and again. I didn't ask him what he was thinking. Sometimes, silence is the only language grief understands. A few days later, he came into the kitchen while I was folding laundry. He looked tired, but softer somehow. Mom, he said quietly, do you think people can love someone and still hurt them this much? I folded the towel slowly, thinking, yes, I said. Because love isn't perfect. It doesn't always protect us the way we think it should. He nodded, staring down at the table. I keep remembering all the small things, he murmured. The way she laughed when she burned toast. The way she'd hum while doing dishes. It's strange. I don't remember the fights as clearly as I remember those moments. That's how the heart works, I said softly. It remembers warmth before it remembers pain. He gave a small smile. That sounds like something you'd say. I did just say it, I replied. And for the first time he laughed, quietly, almost shyly, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to. It was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in months. That afternoon, I walked out to the garden. The air was cool, the sky clear. Daniel had planted new flowers, lilies, her favorite. I stood there watching the breeze sway them gently, and I thought of Anna. I wondered if she was safe, if she had found a place where her heart didn't ache as much. Regret, I realized, isn't something that goes away. It just softens around the edges. It turns from a sharp pain into a dull ache. The kind that hums quietly in the background of your days. When Daniel joined me outside, he looked at the flowers and said, I used to think love was supposed to last forever, that if it ended, it meant it wasn't real. I shook my head. Sometimes love ends because it was real, because it was too human to survive everything. He looked down at his hands. I still love her. I know, I said. And that's okay. Loving her doesn't mean you can't move on. It just means you remember, he nodded, eyes glistening. Do you think she'll ever come back? I hesitated. Maybe not to this house, but maybe one day she'll find her way back to herself. That's the kind of return that matters. He didn't answer, but he smiled, a small, sad, grateful smile. A few weeks later, he told me he was thinking of moving out. I need a change, he said. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere that doesn't feel like ghosts are walking the halls. I understood. The house had become a museum of everything they'd been. Every wall carried an echo, every drawer a memory, so we started packing boxes together. One by one, there was a rhythm to it. Wrapping dishes in old newspapers, folding clothes, labeling boxes in thick black marker. We didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. Each small act felt like closing a door gently. When we reached the bedroom, Daniel stopped by the closet. Inside, still hanging neatly, was Anna's white cardigan, the one she used to wear on cool mornings. He stared at it for a long time, then finally said, I'll take it with me. I looked at him. Are you sure? He nodded. It's not about holding on. It reminds me of the good parts, the parts that were ours. He folded it carefully and placed it on top of a box. Sometimes healing isn't about erasing. It's about carrying what's left with grace. The day he moved, the house felt different, lighter but also lonelier. He hugged me tightly before leaving. I'll come by on weekends, he said. You're not getting rid of me that easily, I laughed softly. I wouldn't dream of it. As he drove away, I stood on the porch and watched his car disappear around the bend. Just like I'd done the day Anna left, but this time, I didn't feel the same heaviness. This time, I felt something gentler, like acceptance. In the evenings, I began walking through the house, touching small things. The picture frames, the old clock, the vase on the mantel. Each object carried a story, and I let those stories wash over me like quiet waves. I found the letter again one night, Anna's letter, tucked inside a book where I'd hidden it. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same place I'd read it the first time. Her words felt different now. Back then, they had burned. Now, they simply ached. It was no longer about betrayal. It was about sorrow, confusion, the way people lose themselves trying to do what they think is right. When I reached the end, I'm sorry for breaking something that was already fragile. I whispered to the empty room, I forgive you, and I meant it. Not for her, but for me. Because forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay. It's about deciding not to let it ruin what's left of you. Months passed. Seasons changed. The garden grew wild again, but in a beautiful way. Vines curling over fences, flowers blooming without order. It reminded me that life keeps moving even when we stop to grieve. Daniel would visit often, sometimes alone, sometimes with company, a friend from work, a quiet woman named Rachel who always brought apple pie and smiled softly when she saw me. At first, I didn't ask questions. I just welcomed her, served tea, and listened as they talked about their week. But I saw the way Daniel looked at her, not the way he'd looked at Anna, but with something steadier, calmer. Like a man who'd finally learned that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. One evening, after Rachel left, I asked gently, She seems kind. He smiled. She is. She doesn't try to fix me. She just sits with me. That's how healing begins, I said. Not with grand gestures. Just quiet presence. He nodded. I still think about Anna sometimes. Is that wrong? No, I said. That's memory, not longing. There's a difference, he looked thoughtful. Maybe I'll always carry her with me. Good, I said. That means you loved her honestly. A year later, Daniel invited me to his new house for dinner. It was small but warm. walls painted in soft cream, shelves lined with books, and a table big enough for 3. Rachel greeted me at the door with a hug. "We've been trying a new recipe," she said with a grin. "It might be terrible," I laughed. "Then it'll be real cooking." About what would have happened if things had gone differently. I smiled, sometimes. But if they had, we might not be standing here like this. And I like this. He nodded, understanding. Yeah, me too. When I got home, I turned off the lights and stood by the window for a long time. The moonlight fell across the floor in soft silver lines, and I thought about how far we'd come. Not because we were strong, but because we'd learned how to stay gentle, even when the world wasn't. If there's one thing this story taught me, it's that love changes shape, but it never truly disappears. Sometimes it turns into memory. Sometimes it becomes forgiveness, and sometimes it lives on in the laughter of a little girl named Lily, who has no idea how many broken hearts had to heal just so she could be born into peace. Life moves forward quietly like that, healing what we thought was beyond repair. And if you listen closely enough, in the stillness between one heartbeat and the next, you can almost hear it whisper, "You made it, you're still here, and that's enough." As we ate, I watched them together, the easy laughter, the shared glances. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful, and peace, I realized, was more valuable than perfection. After dinner, Daniel walked me to the porch. The night air was cool, stars flickering above. "Mom," he said softly, "thank you for everything." "For not giving up on me?" I smiled. Mothers don't stop being mothers, even when their children grow. He nodded, eyes glistening. "I think I finally understand what you meant. About love changing form, but never disappearing." I touched his cheek gently. "It always finds a new place to live." That night, when I returned home, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The house was quiet, but no longer empty. Every corner carried echoes of what once was: laughter, arguments, soft music on Sunday mornings. But now, those echoes felt like company, not ghosts. I thought of Anna again. I wondered if somewhere, she too had found peace. Maybe she'd remarried. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe she was just learning to forgive herself, one day at a time. Wherever she was, I hoped she knew that forgiveness had reached her, even from afar. One evening, about 2 years after she left, I received a letter. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. It was from Anna. I sat down before opening it, my hands trembling. "Dear Mary, I don't know if I deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to thank you. You were the only one who ever saw me clearly. Even when I was pretending to be someone else, I've been getting help. I've been trying to live differently. I still think of Daniel every day, but I'm not writing to ask for him back. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, truly sorry, and that I hope he's found someone who brings him peace. Please tell him that I'm okay now. And please, take care of yourself. You were more of a mother to me than I ever knew how to say. With love, Anna." By the time I finished reading, tears had blurred the ink. It wasn't a letter of return. It was a letter of release. I placed it gently in the same box where I kept her first letter, side by side, beginnings and endings resting together. When Daniel came over the next day, I showed him the letter. He read it silently, lips pressed tight, then handed it back with a soft sigh. "She's okay," he whispered. "That's enough." "Yes," I said. "It is." We sat together on the porch, watching the sunset bleed into gold. No more secrets. No more bitterness. Just the quiet understanding that sometimes love's truest act is letting go. It's strange how life rebuilds itself around loss. At first, it feels like the world has stopped turning, but slowly, without you noticing, it starts again, softer, humbler, wiser. I learned that heartbreak doesn't end us. It shapes us. It turns us into people who love more gently, forgive more freely, and hold others with a little more care. Sometimes I still think about that night. The night Anna's truth came to light, The night Daniel broke quietly at my kitchen table, it was the night we all lost something. But it was also the night we began to find ourselves again, because love isn't only about holding on. It's about learning when to release, when to forgive, and when to believe that what's gone can still leave something beautiful behind. It's been 3 years since that letter arrived. Sometimes, when I sit by the window in the evening light, I think about how different everything looks now. The same walls, the same rooms, but the silence feels gentler, as if it's learned how to rest. Daniel visits often. He and Rachel are married now, and last spring, they had a little girl. Her name is Lily, the same as the flowers that still bloom in the garden. She's got Daniel's eyes and a laugh that sounds like sunlight. When she toddles through my living room, touching everything with those small, curious hands, I feel something I hadn't felt in years, the sense that life has a rhythm again, not the one I once had, but a new one, slower and softer. Sometimes, when Lily falls asleep in my arms, I think about Anna. I wonder if she ever found the peace she was searching for. In my heart, I believe she did, because people who carry regret that deep usually don't stop searching until they find forgiveness. And I hope she knows she had mine. I still keep her letters in a small box on the top shelf. I don't open them often anymore. I don't need to. They're not reminders of pain now. They're pieces of history. Quiet evidence that love existed here, even when it didn't last. Every so often, Daniel will see the box and smile gently. He never asks to read them again. He doesn't need to either. Some truths don't require retelling once peace has taken their place. He told me once, "Mom, I used to think my life ended the day she left. But now I realize it just changed direction. And I remember smiling through tears because I understood. Life doesn't end in our losses. It reshapes itself around them." These days, I spend my mornings in the garden. The air smells like soil and promise. I talk to the flowers sometimes. Like old friends, I think that's what healing looks like. Not forgetting the past, but making peace with it. Letting it bloom into something new. I still remember the sound of Daniel's voice that night he read Anna's first letter. I remember the way silence filled the room, thick and heavy, and now when I sit in that same kitchen, I hear a different kind of silence. Calm, ordinary, full of life happening quietly around me. Maybe that's what time does. It doesn't erase pain. It teaches it how to coexist with peace. I've come to believe that regret and forgiveness live side by side. Regret whispers about what might have been, while forgiveness reminds us that we did the best we could with what we knew at the time, and both have their place. If I could speak to Anna now, I'd tell her this: you were loved, you were seen, and though you broke something fragile, you also taught us how to rebuild with gentler hands. And if I could speak to the version of myself who sat at that kitchen table reading her letter for the first time, I'd tell her something too. Hold on, this pain won't last forever. One day, it'll turn into wisdom, and that wisdom will make you softer, not smaller. One evening not long ago, Daniel and Rachel invited me over for dinner. Lily was playing on the floor, stacking blocks and babbling to herself. At one point, she looked up, grinned, and said, "Grandma, play with me." And just like that, everything, the years of heartache, the nights of silence, the tears that once felt endless, faded into the background. As I sat there with her, building little towers that kept falling down, I thought about how much like life that was. We build, we fall apart, then we build again, maybe a little slower, but with more care, and maybe that's the real meaning of love, not perfection, but persistence. That night, as I left their house, Daniel walked me to my car. He looked up at the stars and said softly, "Mom, do you ever think